realized I hadn't started the recording yet, so that's okay because it's all housekeeping information for our panel tonight, which is, once again, Some Like It Hot, Love, Chai, and 5 authors. And I am Mary Elizabeth Iturralde from Creating Conversations in Redondo Beach, and I am delighted tonight to not only have our guest authors here, but also a guest moderator. So Hetal Vasavada is the creator of the blog Milk and Cardamom, a food writer, baker, and master chef alumni. She's written for Food and Wine, Bon Appetit, The Kitchen, and more. She's tonight's guest host, and her book is Milk and Cardamom, Spectacular Cakes, Custards, and More, inspired by the flavors of India. So welcome, Hetal.
Hi, thanks for having me. I am so beyond excited to be moderating this panel. I'm a major reader, and romance is my favorite genre. So I'm excited to be introducing our authors today. First, we have Sonali Dave. She's a USA Today bestselling author who wrote Bollywood-style love stories that explore universal issues. Her novels have been named Best Books of the Year by Library Journal, NPR, The Washington Post, and more. She has won numerous accolades, including the American Library Association's Award for Best Romance, multiple RT Seals of Excellence, an RT Reviewer Choice Award, and has been a RITA finalist and been listed for a Dublin Literary Award. She lives in Chicagoland, and welcome Sonali Dave. Next up, we have Annika Sharma. She's an author of critically acclaimed young adult novel, My So-Called Bollywood Life, and the follow-up, Radha and Jay's Recipe for Romance. She also writes adult contemporary romances, including the Singh family trilogy and If Shakespeare Was an Auntie trilogy, which is launching in March of 2022, guys. And just based on the name, I'm very intrigued. Her writing has been praised by NPR, Teen Vogue, Entertainment Weekly, and more. She lives in Pennsylvania, and you can find her online at nishasharma.com. Next up, we have Farah Haren. Sorry, my brain is like losing it. She's critically acclaimed writer of romances and romantic comedies for adults and teenagers. Her debut, The Chai Factor, was named one of the summer's best books by the Globe and Mail. And her next release, Accidentally Engaged, was praised by Entertainment Weekly, USA Today, Glamour Magazine, and so much more. And it's named one of the best romances of the year by Vulture. Her young adult debut, Tahira in Bloom, will be out in November of this year, so just a couple more weeks. She lives in Toronto with her husband and 2 teenagers. And then we have Suleikah Snyder. She's a best-selling and award-winning author of contemporary and erotic romance, whose work has been showcased in Entertainment Weekly, BuzzFeed, The Times of India, The New York Times, and NPR. And then we have Annika Sharma, who's a communications project manager by day, podcast host of The Woke Desi, a show geared at dual identity millennials, and has been seen in Forbes, on BBC, Spotify, and so much more. Her release, Love, Giant, Other 4-Letter Words, released just 2 weeks ago, and it's received 2-star reviews from the Library Journal and Booklist, and it landed the cover of Booklist's print issue for September and was named Amazon's best romance books for September, which if you haven't grabbed a copy, please do. I have it sitting and I'm going through it right now, and I'm like loving it.
Thank you.
Oh, well, welcome everyone. I am so excited to get this chat started. So one of the best things about, growing up South Asian is the amount of Bollywood our parents put on us. I mean, every week was Bollywood night for us. When I think of love and romance, I mean, my brain automatically goes to Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol and old school Yash Raj films. We've grown up with so many love stories being the main genre. How much has Bollywood influenced the way you write or build the romance in your books?
I don't know, not a whole lot anymore. I mean, it's interesting because I actually don't think Bollywood impacts all South Asians, and assume that kind of that's a narrative we probably shouldn't subscribe to. So, because I grew up on Bengali films too, and on American soap operas. So Bollywood as our, sorry, I don't mean to be corrective, but I just want to put that out there that not all of us watch Bollywood films. I did. So my early books, like the Bollywood romances I wrote and that Sonali have, definitely, obviously it's right there in the title. I have a book called Bollywood Confidential, and I wrote, about the sets of movies, because initially that was the story I thought I could tell as a brown person, right? When I first started writing romance. I thought I had to stick to that world. Even though I'm not actually from India, I grew up in America, I thought I could really only tell that. And I had to grow and realize I could tell stories that were set here that didn't have music and dance numbers involved, So that's my answer on that.
I think my answer is kind of similar to Suleikah's. I grew up watching Bollywood, but it doesn't really influence the love stories I'm telling. But I do tend to add references to Bollywood in my stories because it's the texture of our lives. It is a part of my characters' lives, and I recognize that it's not all South Asians are like that. But I don't find that I am actually influenced in the way I'm writing the story by Bollywood. It's just part of their lives.
So, to me, I think of it as a stylistic choice.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of influence, I definitely think I'm influenced by it because the storytelling, and it's not just Bollywood films, it's the way my grandmothers told stories, or it's just the way stories are told in India, which influences Bollywood, which then in turn influences how we tell stories. Yeah. And I think so for me, it's a stylistic thing where, which goes really well with the romance genre because the emotions are up here. Right, you're pushing the envelope on feelings, and I think that was and Bollywood, again, we have to acknowledge the fact that Bollywood from the 80s and 90s is not the Bollywood of today. So Bollywood itself is completely evolving. I mean, it's a completely different. The storytelling has evolved, and hence I think, and all storytelling has evolved, but I know specifically going for that emotional immersiveness. So I think, like you said, watching Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, almost anybody who loved that film has not watched it once. And the needing to go back, to get back inside that world, that is actively, I think, what I was trying to give my readers, and I do try to give my readers, that immersiveness where you're wholly drowning in your own emotions, that level of coming face to face with your emotions. And so stylistically, that is a conscious choice for me. Yes.
I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about Bollywood, and to be fair, to go along with what Suleikah was saying, I'm actually Telugu, so I'm from South India, and our films are all obviously Telugu or Tamil. And so whenever we watch those, our stories are a little bit different, and they haven't completely caught up in some ways to Bollywood films. But the beauty of, I think, South Asian films as a whole is the subtleties that they demonstrate whenever you're feeling a lot of emotion that are really beautiful to actually pull from and put in your stories, because then you allow growth for characters in ways that perhaps aren't quite so overt. And I think that Bollywood as a whole has shaped mine in that way, that it's always like in the touch or in the, in the sort of the more gentle moments, the moments that you don't necessarily see, but that's not better or worse. It's just a very cool way of being influenced in the first place, is growing up with these stories where you didn't get to see people kiss and you didn't get to see people do anything. And in one way, and for one very prude looking moment, it actually did influence it positively, rather than turning me off completely. But I agree, it's kind of one of those things that can go wrong if you allow it to, but there's also really great lessons you can take.
Okay, Annika, I have to, you're making me realize that I actually did go the complete opposite route with my books, because they're all filthy and everyone's always making out and there's no subtlety whatsoever.
That's
why I love your book.
That's your influence. There you go.
The new Bollywood is they have sex first and then they talk. Now I'm sounding completely like an auntie, so which is fine with me. But yeah.
No, I think for me, Bollywood is actually like exactly what I wanted to focus on when I started writing. But I'm writing from the third diaspora, right? I'm an American-born Desi, so I'm writing American Desi stories. And when I wrote my so-called Bollywood life, I think Bollywood specifically affects my young adult fiction, but when I wrote my so-called Bollywood life, my intention was to focus on the fandom of Bollywood, not so much like the stylistic elements or like the actual direct influence of Bollywood, but specifically like how does it affect the way that South Asians in America basically perceive love or perceive destiny, or how has it influenced their mindset about romance? And then with Radha and Jay's Recipe for Romance, for the influence was not so much their actual storyline, but it was the art that they did. So it was part of their passion. So it was not so much, again, not so much the stylistic or the direct influence, but it was how they engaged as fans with the content and how it influenced the work that they were doing and the dancing that they were doing. And that to me has always been very fascinating. Like Bollywood is such a big part of a lot of South Asians, like the way that they collectively get together. Like there's a Bollywood movie on the TV, like on Sunday night or Sunday mornings or whatever. Or there's like at weddings, everyone knows the same like 2 dance steps of like of a song, right? So, so that is how I wanted to kind of address the Bollywood influence. And I think it's, you know, just to kind of level set for the people who are on the call or who are watching, like Suleikah and Annika said, Bollywood is not the only film industry, and like Farah said, it's not the only form of entertainment or the only medium of entertainment. I think all of us have done our parts as writers to start unpacking a little bit of that, of the assumptions that go around Bollywood. And I think that's, you know, we're all doing it in different ways, which just shows how we're not monolithic.
Oh, totally agree. I think Bollywood is now beyond Bollywood. I feel like indie movies have been doing so much better than even traditional blockbuster Bollywood movies. But they're also exploring genres. Like for me in the 90s growing up, all I remember is like extreme horror or like full on love fests, you know, full romance Bollywood. And there's so many new genres nowadays. And, you know, going from genres to also, you know, tropes and how we build stories and how you know, build the romance, like Annika said, the small, gentle, quiet moments. There's tropes that come with romance. Like for me, I'm a sucker for enemies to lovers books. Like there's always a scene where like the 2 main characters get stuck in a room. There's only one bed. One thing leads to another. If there was one trope that you could do away with within romance, what would it be?
Doing away with a trope? Oh.
Okay. What's your favorite trope, and what's one that like you're like, oh my God, this has been overdone. I don't want to see it again.
Oh, overdone. That's a whole different thing. There is one that I loathe absolutely, and that is I don't even know what the word is, but it's keeping the child away from the parent.
Secret baby.
Well, secret baby, yeah. Well, this heinous form of secret baby where a child is kept away from a parent, it's just on a personal level, you know, for personal history, complete trigger. Do not ever want to see that, want to be told if it's there in a book. Because
I have to admit, I love Secret Baby, but in mafia romances, like it has to be like some sense of danger, like saving it from the mafia family, like that for me works.
Yeah, I think
for all of those who are watching this webinar, Nisha has been on a serious mafia case.
Like 5 years.
But I also want to admit that I wrote a Secret Baby book in my early Bollywood trilogy, where her parents took her baby from her and raised it as her little sister.
That's a different thing. That's not what I mean. That was
okay.
That was lovely. What I don't like is she is now 20 or 16 or 14 or 10, and you know the one parent has missed 10 years, and you better work really hard to explain that to me, because as a parent, you don't do that to a child. And favorite trope, you know, I think I need therapy for this. Every second book of mine is a second chance at first love, and no, I'm not taking questions about that. Absolutely, 4 reasons. Love that freshness of first love, and I think, you know, trying to and growth. Like, what's better? You were a stupid child when a wonderful thing happened to you, and then have you become an adult who's come into themselves now, you know, and still have that.
I love that.
Same.
I love reading second chance romance.
I love reading it. I love writing it. I need to write more. I think I'm gonna write more of those.
Yeah.
Stop. I need to, somebody stop me.
You know, I thought about this question though about tropes, and like I think there are parts of every trope that I don't like and parts of every trope that like I'm obsessed with and I love. Like enemies to lovers, there are certain enemies to lovers, like specifically fantasy, I think it works really well. I think in contemporary it's a little harder because it's like you have to have a really good redemption arc in order to make this work for me. And every enemies to lovers contemporary that I've read recently, it's been really hard. And I'm saying this from a place of like, struggling with my own like Taming of the Shrew retelling that is like coming out, right? So I'm coming from a place of like it's not great, but and then of course like secret babies, like Hello Mafia Romances, like that's the best secret baby ever. Like when she shows up with twins, like I need you to protect your children, that kind of thing. It's great. But I have to say, like one particular I guess trope that I still have not found necessarily very many redeeming stories about is when the heroine has no agency and she's kind of like it's one of those like I'm the only one who's ever experienced this and I guess I'm the chosen one and like, oh, woe is me. I'm like, now I have to like save the world. So that one's hard for me. Like oh, I didn't realize that I was so different. Kind of thing. I thought I was a normal person.
I'm not like the other girls.
Yes, that's it. That's the one.
Harry Potter in female form. You don't like Harry Potter?
Oh, look, I don't think Harry Potter is really like for me, and this is the only Harry Potter comment I'll make, other than the fact that we all know about J.K. Rowling's situation right now. How there's nothing redeemable.
She's a giant turf.
Yeah,
I just thought that's the situation.
But about Harry Potter, as usual, the man takes the credit, and they would have all died if Hermione had not done something. And of course, her name isn't on the cover of the book. So,
yep.
Hermione Granger saves all your asses. Is really what this story should be called.
The third wheel.
Yeah.
I know we've like deviated from tropes, but there we go.
Yeah, right. But I'm kind of with you on I like most trope. For me, it just depends on the author or the creator of the TV show and the writer's room. Like for me, I will accept most tropes because I've been watching soap operas, American soap operas, since I was like in the womb. So I've been trained for massive tropiness, like devil possession. Actually, Bollywood movies do that too, but you know what I mean?
Is that what I'm hearing?
Snakes turning into snakes, So for me, it's like how you do it. If you do it well, whatever it is, I'll accept it, within certain parameters, obviously, like stuff like non-con and things like that, obviously is a hard limit, but most everything else, I will accept if you do it well, and I will follow you to the ends of the earth. If
you do it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My favorite trope to write is fake relationships. I absolutely love writing them. And the one I'm working on right now is that, and I love getting to that moment where they're like, is this real? Are these feelings real? Is it fake? Is that hand touch pretend? Does it really? I love getting to that point. I love writing it. A trope that I don't like to read about, which is actually kind of funny, is when like kind of enemies to lovers, but more when they're competing, like rival something, because I find like similar to what Nisha said, that it's really hard to redeem them, because I always see whenever that happens that sometimes they're like they go a little bit too far with the backstabbing and the person. I need to believe the HEA at the end. And if a little bit of a competition makes them like be cruel to each other, then I'm like, then the relationship, what's going to happen when something bad happens? Mm-hmm. So I find that those usually don't work to me. And it's funny because I tend to write a lot of competition-y stories, but I always make sure that my people are on the same side. They're not on opposite sides. But that's just me.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
I probably agree with everything Farah just said, so I'll just echo all of that. I think the other thing is too, I think the competition thing is hard for me because as someone who's competitive, I see where the flirtatiousness can be like a fun thing, you know, like if you go with your boyfriend or your spouse or whoever, and you know, your fun buddy, and you go and you're just like, you know, I don't know, at an arcade or like at bowling or whatever, and you make it fun. It's great. But I think being on two different sides of the competition, I like, as a competitive person, I want to see you lose. Therefore, I do not care about all of your redeeming qualities and how wonderful you are, because I just want
Annika
to
will cut a bitch.
So like, just to illustrate exactly like how this is, like we did, my husband brought me into his friend's fantasy football group last year, and I won the league. And it's a year later, and I'm currently at the bottom of the league, and I still ask him, so what's it like being married to a champ? And it's like, you know, it's like still to this day, it's like the thing that I love bringing up. And so I am also a really bad loser. So that's not going to work personally. So I have a very hard time falling into it with the
Oh
story.
yeah, I will take that to my grave. Like,
So you guys, since it's supposed to be about growth, it's the perfect arc, right? I mean,
Maybe.
yeah, I mean, we've talked about tropes too long, but it's, yeah, the whole, I really love people making real mistakes.
Yeah.
Like we all kind of stay away from we want them to stay, you know, smelling like roses. And I think Enemies to Lovers gives you a chance to really push that. Like how far can I fall? And then how satisfying is my redemption?
Yeah. I think the reason I like it is it was not love at first sight for me and my husband. It was definitely like at first sight.
17th sight.
Took us like 4 months to be like, okay, maybe we kind of like each other.
ours was marriage of convenience.
Just convenience.
Yeah.
Love it.
Funny.
All right. So in a lot of your books, the main characters are of South Asian descent. How do you think your background and experiences, whether it be as, you know, a third culture, you know, American born Desi, or, you know, an immigrant, how do you think your experiences shaped the characters that you've created in your books?
I think the question is, how didn't they shape the characters in our
Yeah.
books? You know, it's funny because, and we can all say this, I think, as writers of color, but we have all seen how people tend to pigeonhole people of color as a whole and just say like, wow, I'm really surprised that you fall in love like we do. Like what? Are you kidding? You know, and oh, you're dating? You do that? You know, and I think that those moments, this is kind of I think some of our writing, I don't know about you guys, I'm sure this is the case though, because we've had so many conversations, we're all friends, but like some of this writing comes from places of deep trauma, and some of it comes from, you know, places of sheer rage, from all the microaggressions or all the different experiences that we've all faced, and some of the beauty too that we faced. You know, like every one of our books, I'm sure, has had some really glorious family scene where you're just like, oh my God, this came from the best day ever with my family and my friends and our cultures or whatever. And then that's awesome. But I think, you know, all of those moments, the highs and the lows, all come from being that dual identity. And like some of it comes from really, really dark places.
Yeah. I know that when I started writing, all of my characters were white, right? I started, you know, because that's who I saw in most media, except for the films we were renting from the one Indian store that was 30 miles away, you know. But all my media was basically white. So those were the characters I was writing. It wasn't until I got to my 20s, I want to say even my mid 20s, that I was really comfortable writing South Asian heroines and South Asian characters. But first I had to write a bunch of deeply angsty crap that no one needs to see about growing up. So like all that trauma, it's in a drawer. Actually, it's in a drawer that's in a trash can in a dumpster. Like I had to get it all out and work through it and then write what I'm kind of writing now, right? Like the more joyful, balanced, because I don't want to write angsty lit fic about unhappy South Asians, like we may have had trauma in our childhoods or, because of the culture clash, but ultimately, like I was perfectly fine growing up in the United States and being bilingual, and I survived, and I have great friends here. So I want to show that joy in my books. Like, we can grow up normal and liking everything that everyone else likes and singing and dancing and loving our culture and our new, our old culture and our new culture. So I don't know if that made any sense, because
I think that made perfect sense. I was just
lost
thinking,
the
Nisha, I
plot
love that.
halfway.
We can grow up, and I think the Annika's point is that people have this perception of what how we love and how we are in our families, and there is no culture clash. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not sitting here like tortured. Am I Western? Am I Desi? Like, there's no culture clash. I can be everything. I can be me. And then like I don't remember what they called, but a triple generation. So my family came from India to Tanzania to Canada. So there's all sorts of cultures in there, and they're all there, and they're all good, and I love them all, and there's no culture clash.
And I think that that's something that you brought up, Farah, is that, it's the idea that we're all struggling. I'm sure at some point in our lives, this, like I mentioned too, like we've all had those phases where we've been like, oh, do I have to choose one? Like, is this a thing? But I think that oftentimes people, especially as adults, people expect that we're still there.
Yeah.
And it comes in subtleties now, and it comes in smaller moments, or, and sometimes very large moments, but it's not just a constant state where, like, as a teenager, I remember my senior year, we had these speeches that we had to give to our class, and mine was 100% on being confused because at the time too, I had 5 other Indian kids in my graduating class. We didn't have anyone. And so I grew up in a very white town. So like at the time I was like, the hell, I have no idea. And I was going into college, which is where I started to figure it out. And obviously now I'm relatively well-adjusted. I hope you all think I'm well-adjusted. And, and now it's much better. But I think there are still people who think that even as adults, we're always thinking about it. We wake up and we're like, oh my God, how am I going to be Indian today? Or how am I going to be brown? Or how am I going to be white? And it's really not that much of a big deal, And I think that we like writing characters who show that same level of awareness, and yeah, they have challenges, but it's not necessarily like, they're deep in the trenches all the time, wondering what they are and how they're going to fit in. Because I think at some point they have to get past it and go about their actual lives.
Right.
I do think it's important to highlight that they're like I'll talk for myself in particular. Like, I am coming from a place of privilege. I am speaking from a place of like, I was fortunate enough to have like a very like secure, safe upbringing where I didn't have to worry about questioning my identity. That is not the case for everybody, but for me and, for many of us, so, Farah, Suleikah, Annika, we're all mentioning it here, that like brown trauma is not something that we want to put on the page, even though it exists. But I think it's like really important to mention that like we all have our own privileges, and like that will come out in the writing that we have. So just like want to like put a blanket statement out there, because I think one of the biggest critiques I've always gotten as a writer is I'm North Indian. I come from a lot of place of privilege, and because there's so few South Asian narratives that are still coming out, like a lot of that trauma that individuals are feeling, they don't see it on the page necessarily, or they don't see themselves yet reflected on the page. So I think it's really important for us to just kind of like just level set and say that this is not the case for everybody. I'm putting that out there. I feel like I've been affected by these reviews, so that's why I have to say it.
That's a really great point. I think that because for so long there weren't that many of us writing this, that people looked for representation in every South Asian story. When we're writing our representation, that's it. Like, I tell people, you can relate to my stories 100% if you come from this part of Toronto, whose parents came from Dar es Salaam, whose great grandparents came. Like, it's that specific, and that specificity is what I'm going for, because I've never seen a story like mine, and I think that's something that I can tell best. But we are each writing our own representation. We're not trying to represent all South Asian stories.
We're certainly telling our stories, and I think that it doesn't even have to be a South Asian story, right? The stories I enjoy most is when I read something and don't think it's generically white. It's specifically this kind of this kind of New England family, or this part of the South, not even the general South, Southern story. So I enjoy specificity in my in what I read, and but also, I mean, bringing experience, if we're talking about that, I think almost not a huge theme in every one of my books is making home. making home in a place, whether it's in, I mean, to be cheesy, in someone's heart, is your family your place, making home, right? And so there's, and that not being a traumatic experience. I mean, we choose again, not a monolith, but it's not all dark and depressing. Rarely, like running away from trauma is not if you did percentages, there's a solid percentage of South Asians who did not run from persecution, right? Who made a choice. And there is something about that ambition-based choice making that makes you a certain kind of person. And and so I think that, again, specificity, that experience is different from an experience of running from trauma. And so what you write a story, right? And so specifically, I think being cognizant of it, and some of it is felt experience, but you don't only write your felt experience, right? And so thematically, I think it comes into stories. And I specifically find looking for home, or as a woman finding your place, like those are two things that impacted me growing up and living, and those are in my books.
Yeah, I think I tend to write a lot of characters who are just learning to accept and live their truth, like whether that's sexual. There's a lot of sexual freedom in my books, and I can say that that's because I grew up in a very cloistered household, right, where my parents were overprotective. We weren't allowed to date, which is, yes, stereotypical, but you know what, I grew up fine, like, despite not being allowed to date. But in my books, I'm like, well, I don't want to talk about not being allowed to date. I want to talk about being able to date everybody you feel like dating, and with as little clues as possible. No, so for me, I take how I grew up and I twist it. I go, okay, this is where things didn't go this way for me, but for my characters, I'm going to flip it. And I enjoy doing that because it also helps me keep my own life separate. Right? Like my life is mine. Some of the experiences make it on the page, but I keep that for me, and I put all of my id running wild on the page. Just
I mean, that's the beauty, right? You guys get to build this wonderful world in your books for the readers, and it's how Sonali, you were talking about like comfort reads. Like I have comfort reads, comfort worlds that I want to go to and experience, and then you don't necessarily like. It can be exactly the opposite of how you grew up, or whatever you want it to be. That's the beauty of it, right? Talking about creating worlds, where do you guys go? I'm sure like we've all had our fair share of writer's block, or like a moment of like, oh my God, I don't think I can write another 10 pages today. I'm over it. What do you guys do to get inspired again, or just kind of get back into it? Do you, snuggle up and watch a bunch of Hallmark movies? Do you like, don't want to even think about it? I'm just going to go on vacation. What's your go-to routine when you're looking for a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration, and a little bit of a break?
These guys.
I was like, do you ever take breaks, Nisha?
That hurts, but that's fair.
I love you.
Yeah, no, we usually, there's like an SOS email that will go out, or like an SOS Slack message that will go out to the other South Asian authors. And it's like, sending a Zoom link for 8 p.m. tonight. Help me with this plot problem. And that is something that happens. And then for me, I'm very fortunate. I have another group of author friends that I've been writing with every morning. We write about 2 to 4 hours. And they're also the place that I go. So it's my personality is very much like I need to talk out plot problems. So if I hit a writer's block, there's 2 reasons for it. It's 1, that I'm burned out, or 2, that I've hit some sort of like a plot device issue. And usually getting insight from other writer friends is the best way to dismantle it. But the burnout, like the second reason why I have an issue is burnout. And for that, there's like nothing that will help it. If I like to go to the manuscript, I have to literally shut down everything and walk away for at least 72 hours, like not look at any computer screen, devices, nothing. And even then, 72 hours is very little. Like I once had burnout for 9 months. I couldn't write for 9 months. Yeah, I mean, it happens. And hopefully that won't happen again, because I've been putting measures in place to like walk away when I know I'm feeling that my well is low. But like those are the two places. And because writing is also a business, right? So like burnout and plot problems and writer's block those are major issues, and we have to like manage them and take care of ourselves and take care of our creativity. But at the same time, like we have to show up to work. So you got to do something about it.
I think doing other creative things too helps me a lot. I think having the podcast, having a day job that's not actually creative and that utilizes writing skills but uses them in a business setting, those are really helpful to sort of tweak the muscle a little bit and kind of still be using it, but using it in different capacities. And that sometimes gives the creative writing muscle that I need for the books to kind of take a break while I'm still strengthening the rest. So that's really helpful for me. But the treadmill is also a really great place for me. It's very much a sanctuary, I think.
I like to read if I'm really stuck on something. Starting to read something that I'm not even reading it necessarily for inspiration, has nothing to do with that book, but that usually gets my brain going again. And I mean, I'm assuming for the rest of you, but I got into writing romance because I loved reading it so much, right? So that is exactly how I started coming up with stories in the first place, is while I was reading other romances. So it still works. I was doing that today.
I treat myself and my creativity as a thing that, I don't garden, but I garden myself. And I'm really, so this is the first year in my writing life that I've worked on multiple projects at the same time, and I've tried to almost double my what I've produced. And so it's been a very actively focus down, pare down what's important, actively focus down what you need to do, because it has been that burnout. It's been a management. Self-management has been a thing. This year it was a good year to do it because it was a quiet year or two for all of us. But I think so it's different every time. I'm the opposite of you, Annika, where I used to be a very creative person. I used to paint, and I used to sing, and I used to redo, like put in railings in my house, like huge projects, all of that. And as I started writing more, like all my other creative interests have completely lost any interest for me. And it's not like they've died and I want to do it or whatever. I wonder, I'm like, why am I not feeling the need to paint? It's just gone away, and it's gone away. And so I watch it, but I don't worry about it. I was really exhausted before this panel because I'm also kind of jet lagged, just having come back from India. And I turned on music while getting dressed and danced for 10 minutes, and I'm okay. So it's like different things, but life, I think, just going out with friends, cuddling with the dog, hanging, friends and family, and just living. Or then sometimes just closing your eyes and just going to sleep because you can feel that burnout coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gone like 9 months to a year without writing, at large chunks of time, like huge burnout, like massive writer's block. But what I always try to do is try to make sure that I'm refilling my creative well. Basically what you're all saying is that I try to make sure that I have a full day. I go out, I talk to people, or I watch my soaps, or I read a good book, cook if I'm up to it. And those things all kind of gel. And by the time I'm ready, like 9 p.m., all of a sudden I get hit with a bolt of lightning and I'm like typing. Like that's the good day, right? Like the day where that actually works and you're like, yay. Like last night I was randomly working on a story after having a decent day. Actually it was a rough day. But I somehow managed to like be able to sit down after having a big emotional day and write because there was enough fodder. Like I need like kindling to make my fires.
Totally understand that. You got to fill your cup. And I mean, it's very different as like, I think a recipe writer for me, and the way I get creative is like get out there and travel and try new foods. And I'm sure for you guys, it's yeah, just living life. You got to fill your cup before you can pour yourself into a creative process. So we're getting closer to the end, and so that we have time for Q&A, let's do a quick speed round. What is your favorite romance genre, and who's your favorite author? I'm mostly asking because I'm looking for new authors and new books to read all the time, and I'm just looking.
Okay, I'll go first. My favorite genre is all of them, because I will read just about any kind of romance, fantasy, thriller, the occasional mafia romance. Nisha can feel victorious, even though I don't really, but and for favorite author, I'll go with Jeannie Lynn. She has written some of the best historical romances of all time. She's very underrated and underknown, which is a shame. She writes romances set in Tang Dynasty China. Ooh. And they're just gorgeous. They're from Harlequin. You can find them at e-tailers. She's phenomenal, and I will sing her praises to the heavens. So that's my pick there.
I will read anything and everything by Nalini Singh, and literally anything and everything by this woman. And for me, favorite genre or favorite author is a tier. It's not a person or a specific category. There's a tier, which is why Nalini works really great, because she does all of it, between sci-fi, fantasy / contemporary. I think we're just waiting for her to tap into historical, but that would be my pick.
For me, I think my favorite genre is probably contemporary right now, rom-coms. I love reading rom-coms. I love writing rom-coms. Historical romance too. I like Regencies. And I'm going to say my favorite author, I still go back to my Jane Austens. Especially when I like contemporary so much, I really love to discover new contemporary authors and new voices. So it's hard for me to pick one favorite, because they don't have the big backlist yet. So it's hard for me to pick a favorite. If I were to pick a favorite historical, I love Ava Lee, I love Tessa Dare, but I still keep going back to my Jane Austen.
I would say contemporary and rom-com as well. This is probably high school, maybe. I got into Tilly Bagshaw novels. I don't know if you guys have ever read hers, but they're very some of them are very glamorous and very white, totally white. But so white. But they're very glamorous and just sort of outside of my world. And I love those. I love Josie Silver as well. Recently, One Day December is probably one of my favorite books of all time. And Sonali's actually, but that makes me still sound like a fangirl, and I'm still going on 3 years of being this fangirl. So I think at some point I'll move past it. But
I'm good. Thank you. I rom-com, and I don't mean I've found again in these past 2 years that comedy is something that has has really saved me. This just being able to laugh at things has been fabulous, and so that's a real art, to actually make people laugh out loud. But I mean rom-com in terms of larger, more complicated stories, and I think rom-com gives you space for that. And I really love that about that. But I'll read anything. I'll read all of it. I've tired a little bit of the Regency. I'm finding it harder and harder to look away from the colonization and all of that. And so I start getting annoyed when when wealth is being described, because I can't now say, oh, that didn't come from the rape and loot and plunder of my people, which is, which is very complicated being an immigrant. So not going to go there, but anything it has to it has to have a love story, and it has to end happily. So romance for sure. I do like complexity added, thrown in, humor thrown in. So rom-com. I don't know that I can say there are too many favorite authors to name, but I will give a shout out to Beverly Jenkins for sure, because none of us would be here. I thoroughly believe not one of us would be here. We're all standing on her shoulders and the shoulders of, Brenda Jackson and Nalini Singh. And so for sure, if you're looking for historicals to read, you read Miss Bev. And if I were to shout out an author that I actually envy and, is not even a book author, but it's Zoya Akhtar, and she writes Hindi cinema, and she's actually also written Made in Heaven. No,
Mhm.
is it Made in Heaven?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a streaming show, but her kind of storytelling and her kind of character development and her kind of focusing in on theme is something I have rarely seen other authors do, and I absolutely just will watch anything she makes.
So I'm actually going to pop in with a question that I've been trying to phrase correctly, and it's still probably not fully phrased correctly, but one of the things that y'all have discussed is about, the joy of representation and getting to see romances that aren't just a bunch of privileged white people running around. And certainly for readers in the South Asian diaspora, it's important to see yourself and to get to have those books. But do you do anything when you're writing to make them to make the books something that your publisher can take out and say, this is a romance, not just this is a niche romance?
I mean, why would it be a niche I'm just going to cut you off right there and go, why would it be a niche romance just because we're brown? No, they're books. They're books that we're all writing, and white people do read them. Like, we have a white audience, we have Black readers, we have Latin readers. Just because we are South Asian authors and our books have South Asian characters doesn't mean that we're only marketing to the South Asian audience or the diaspora. Like, we have a huge amount of readers from other spaces, and they don't consider us niche. They consider us romance. So I hope
think
that
also, like, the thing that a lot of booksellers, librarians, like publishers are starting to realize is what the term global audience means.
Yes.
Because the reason why the word niche has been kind of attached to diverse fiction for so long is because they had never really, their biases kind of created this, like, these blinders. And over the years, thanks to work like Miss Bev and thanks to work like Beverly Jenkins and Nalini Singh, those blinders are being torn away. And we all, like here, and all of us as authors, we're not writing for niche audiences. We're writing for global audiences, and we're just waiting for publishers to really catch up.
And I think they are catching up. I'm just imagining, like, maybe 5-7 years ago, we wouldn't see South Asian stories on the rom-com table in the Barnes and Noble with trade paperback and just housed with everything else.
Exactly.
We actually just got a question popping up asking if we feel competitive because there's more South Asian authors coming up now, especially in rom-coms. And it's like, no, we love this. Are you kidding me?
We love them.
Wait, we're not alone anymore. We're, the more of us that are out there, the less people think that we're niche or that we're not for them. We're for everyone. We want more of you. Come on.
Actually, Hetal and I did an episode on my podcast. I had her on it, and I remember she was saying something that stood out as a whole. And she was like, I will be 100% transparent about everything because I want more people up here with me. Yeah. And she and I have stood strong together, like, on this as friends just over the last few years, that, like, the stage only gets bigger as you pull more people up. And so there is zero point in sitting there and saying, well, this is my space on the stage. You either make the stage bigger so everybody shines, or you can just get right off, because there's zero point in being that person who pushes away people who are also trying to do the same thing you're doing, or who, better yet, are adding to the space and making it wider and better and more well-rounded. And, one of our biggest criticisms, I think, as writers that we get are often from other South Asians who say, I'm still not seeing my stories represented. And that is a huge problem. If they are looking at a group and still saying they're looking at people of their own and still saying, I don't see my stories, then there needs to be more people telling those stories.
Exactly. Because we can't tell them for everyone. Like, I can't tell, there's just things.
Let's be honest. Like, let's be honest, the term competition, when it comes to, like, the view that there is competition in the first place, is a colonial mindset. It's colonialism, right? Because there's very few spots at the top, and that's what everyone expected us to fight for. And that is a mindset that we have dismantled. And I think it's just a matter of time of people seeing that there's so much more space for other authors to come in, and it's just a matter of people catching up.
Yeah.
And it's also freeing in that it helps us because we don't want to carry the mantle of the entire South Asian story.
Not at all.
No, never.
So
much
God.
pressure.
And I want to read South Asian stories where I feel like I learned something that I have not felt. So there's that, at every end. And so absolutely, I think we need to stop thinking about a book as, oh, this is a South Asian story and that is a, East Asian story. And, it's we read them for being stories, and this is active denichification, if that,
Yes.
and we want active denichification, which brings me back to your question, which I had almost a hard time understanding, because I think what you were asking is, are we asked by our editors or our publishing houses to do something differently so we might appeal to more people? Is that what you were asking?
Actually, not quite. I feel like in a lot of ways you've given me a very positive answer. I'm an older bookseller, and I've been in the bookselling world for a long time. And there was definitely a time, but I feel like we're growing and moving away from it, when basically if you didn't produce the quote unquote everyman book, obviously everybody universally understands, the old white college professor who's in love with his Anjuni student. And that's the story everybody understands. And everything else is niche. But I am glad that we have moved away from that. And I love all the energy that has come into helping reassure me on that point.
Well, I think because romance novels have never been the story of a white college professor falling in love with his younger student,
I don't understand that story.
I don't get it. We came into a genre that was already open to women, and not just women, but gay men, gay women, not just heterosexual stories and white stories. There were already people writing about brown women, about gay women, about gay men, about trans people. We're not reinventing the wheel. These were all things that were already there. And like Sonali said, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. People came before us. So we're, romance is welcoming that way. We may fight sometimes, but we already had that safe space to land in terms of not having to bend to a white male aesthetic.
Right, but we were bending to a white female aesthetic, and so it. I mean,
that's true.
It has been what especially Suleikah and I, because just simply in terms of years, is it's astounding. It is astounding how much publishing has changed, and it is astounding how much more it still needs to. And so we're well on our way, but we're not there. But once
that's the catch up, right? Like that's where everyone needs to catch up and realize that.
Yeah, because we are all here. I mean, yes, we're all here. It's just the publishers still don't see everyone.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I was told that I wouldn't get more money for my cookbook because it was niche, because it would be desserts on top of it being Indian. And I'm like, yeah, but anyone can make this. Have you guys found it difficult with when you were looking for publishers in the first place? Either pigeonholing your book when you're like, no, this has a mass, it does. You could be anyone and love, read a romance. It doesn't matter. So no, you're not directly only a niche or a certain demographic writer. Did you have to check with publishers?
Yeah, 100%. My publisher for Bollywood Life, and I can say this now because we've grown together. My publisher for Bollywood Life, we fought so hard because they didn't think that the word Bollywood was something that everyone would know what it is. They did not want to have it in the title. They didn't want to have it in the title. And the second book, Rather Than Jay's Recipe for Romance, I made a very strong case to put a lenga on the cover. And the first comment was like, oh, we want some clothing that everyone can identify with. So like, and it was an educational moment and they were educated, but like,
I mean, they know they can get lehengas at ASOS now, right? Like that's
Right,
like big, right?
Oh my God.
How much more white can we get? Yeah.
and this is
People
no
are wearing
shade,
lehengas at
right? Like this is
Coachella,
no
okay?
shade on my publisher. Like I don't want to put shade on my publisher
Right.
specifically, because this is like I was working with individuals who like, you know, they were open to it, but they just didn't know. And it was just one of those moments where it was like, okay, this is a thing and we have to like move past it. Global mindset, global audience, like let's move past it. And they were like, okay, we will take your lead and we will go. And that was the best thing they could have done for me. And so I have to say, like, I appreciate their support and all of that, but that's like, they were coming from a place where they just had no clue. And though that was like their preconceived notions around
You
publishing.
made me
that
think
we
of
had to-
something that I cannot say on air.
On air, I'll say this on air. I've sat and I've said this on air in every one of my, but I mean, I think it needs to be brought up, is that I have, when I was pitching my, stories, was first pitching my stories, I've had editors look me straight in the eye and say, you mean both, like completely flummoxed by the fact that you mean both protagonists are Indian? Can we change one? And we've all, I mean, everybody has been asked to do that. And so that was a fight to not do that. And I know that everybody didn't not do that. And so, which is also a choice that people should be allowed to make. But we've specifically been asked things like that. I've been asked to put glossaries in my books, which I have not done. I find it extremely distracting when I'm reading, when a person stops and explains every single thing, roti, the flat, round, tortilla shaped, blah, blah, blah. Like if you can do it in context, that's fine. But to stop and translate, that is a thing several editors will stop and ask you to do. And you can, you choose to make it contextually possible, but so specifically choosing not to do things, these are because things, everybody has their lines, but yeah, we're constantly asked to make ourselves more consumable.
Well, like the you made me think of italicization. I had to go through that with my two recent books, with Big Bad Wolf and Pretty Little Lion, where I don't italicize any of the foreign languages anymore, because there's been a huge push to the fact these are our languages. Why are we othering them? We speak them. And so I think one of the copy editors has gone through and it started italicizing all of my foreign words. And I had to be like, no, stet, none of my work will ever have that. Italicizing for emphasis, sure, but you're not going to italicize the Hindi, the Bengali, the Russian, the Spanish, whatever is spoken, no.
Natively, right? And there's a line too, because again, if I speak Marathi and I'm saying a word from Bengali while talking, so yes, so in it for story, not for marking. It's not a little tattoo saying exotic,
right?
But having said that, we all have earlier books when we didn't have as much say or as much awareness, and so that
we couldn't push back.
Yeah.
Like I had to translate all of the Bollywood movie titles in my so-called Bollywood life. That was a decision that was made, and I could not fight it. It's in the back of the book. To this day, it's there. To this day, it's there. And I mean, like I said, there's no shade with my publisher. They did the best they could, because there are certain people in publishing that will fight for you. And those are the allies that we really respect. And that's why we continue to publish with publishers, because we believe that those people will be our allies and they will support us and fight for us. But, it's a growing pain.
Yes. Oh, I just realized that someone from my publisher is on here, and I'm like, I don't mean to slam the copy.
Stephanie is the best. We love Stephanie.
Stephanie's great. The book is awesome. The copy editor's wonderful. I
think it really depends, though. It's like Nisha was saying with the team, we all are growing together. There are moments where even we go, I had a moment recently where I realized I was italicizing everything. And I was like, why am I doing this? This is my language. What am I doing? And so I was like, I'm othering myself. No one even came to me with this problem. I was doing this to myself anyway, just out of sheer habit. And
Right.
there's moments where we also have challenging moments too, where we're like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Like, why are we setting the precedent for this in the first place? And so those are reckonings that we're having with ourselves, and also that publishing is going through. And it really does support, you do have incredible people who are so supportive of your work and who are pushing you to be better. And like for my editor, she's a champ. We have such a good relationship, but I also know that there have been people in the past who perhaps weren't quite so great, and who have said that, like Sonali was saying, two brown people, what? Like, you do that, and like, how are we supposed to sell that? And there's all these different dynamics that are at play, but this industry as a whole is growing, but it also means changing a pipeline too that comes ahead of us. It doesn't just stop with the authors being progressive and being normal and trying to show what our lives really look like. It goes beyond that to change publishing itself and make sure that there are people of color in all of these rooms that these decisions are being made in, and that there's people who are advocating for us in all of those spaces and who are saying, you know what, this italicization problem needs to go, or we need to be able to pull more people in. It's a problem that goes far beyond authors and editors or authors and their teams. It really is about diversification of the whole system.
Even the readers. I mean,
like
I can tell
system,
you,
like any system.
10 years ago when I was starting out, and even in 2014 when 2012, 2011, when my Bollywood books were coming out, they had brown people on the cover. They didn't sell very well at all. It was all brown people on the cover, all brown characters. And honestly, after that, I did start writing interracial. And my first book that sold well had a white man on the cover and no brown person. And that was a decade ago, right? In this industry, that's what we were facing. No one wanted to buy my brown people on the cover. Now, look at it. We've got covers full of brown people. Yes, most of them are illustrated, but they're still brown. And people are buying them. So even in a decade, look how much can change. And that's because everyone changes, not just us. Right? The whole pipeline has to change.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to keep this conversation going, and I feel like with the energy in this group, we could probably solve most of publishing's ills. Also, it's just been determined, but Sonali will actually be doing a brief in-person meet and greet at Creating Conversations at the end of October. And we will send out that information with the follow-up to this event tonight. So thank you all so much. And I wish you all much love, chai, and other good 4-letter words.
Yes, pick that book up, everyone. Annika's debut.
Thank you. I don't know why we need cheerleaders if we've got your team here with all of you. Thank you all for being here as well.
Thank you so much.